Listen, the research is ridiculous on this. Like, there's actually a thing, I call it secondhand screen time, but it's where we end up paying continuous partial attention to our kids. Continuous partial attention. And so what happens is it actually inhibits the pleasure center of our child's brain when they're going, Mommy, Daddy, watch this, watch this, watch this. And we are on our phones and they're not getting our full 100% attention. They're getting continuous partial attention over time. It inhibits the pleasure center of their brain and actually influences the attachment system. And so for us to pay attention to how we're using our screens, especially in front of our kids, is really, really important.
I won't lose hope in the night when the fire's growing dim. I'll just let go and I'll try. Help me walk this road and find my way back home. Find my way back home. Find my way home.
Welcome back to the Famous Gnome Podcast. Happy New Year to you and happy 2025.
It actually feels like space age to me. That's going to take me a little while to get used to. But.
You know, I used to think of it, like 2025, what's that going to be like? And then here we are, and it's like, oh, we're here, and it doesn't feel much different than 1995 did.
It feels like that was yesterday, and this is far
I'm like,
in the
it
future.
doesn't feel like, I mean, yeah, 1995,
Welcome
2025.
to the future.
I mean, good grief, that's crazy, 30 years ago.
It's a brisk day in Tennessee.
It's really wild. We're getting old.
Yeah.
It's old. It is a brisk day.
Should I tell them how old I am? I just had a birthday.
I think people know how old
back in
you are.
November.
I
Really?
talk about it.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah, I broadcast your weight and your age everywhere I go. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
And I turned 41, and I was out for dinner with a friend. She was like, "You're 41. How does that feel?" She's much younger than I. And I was like, "Yeah, I know. It's starting to feel." Josh is older than me, so.
Well, what's wild is I remember when my grandmother would turn 40. Now you have to understand, back in Pennsylvania,
Josh, that's
where I grew
wild.
up, was like you had your kids when you were like my mom was 19 when she had me, so it was like young, and then so my grandma.
That you had a grandmother in her 40s.
I mean, I was a kid, but I remember that, yeah, for sure.
When she turned 40?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Josh.
I'd have been young, but.
And I have a 4-year-old.
I don't know. It's really weird. But
You're,
at the same
you're
time,
almost
too,
you're closing on 50.
I don't feel. Here's what's crazy though. Like I worked out this morning. I feel healthier than I ever have. I'm eating healthier than I ever have.
You are.
And I think that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about New Year's resolutions. I'm absolutely kidding. We're not talking about New Year's resolutions. But what we are talking about is we're talking about 7 ways to transform the heart of your family. Which
could be your New Year's resolution.
It very well could be. We're talking about hearts. We're in season 2 of the podcast, and we're talking about awakening the heart. And if you've been listening to this series, we've covered various avenues of the heart. We talked about the nervous system. We talked about emotions and the Holy Spirit. And today we're talking about 7 ways to transform the heart of your family. We do this through Tender and Fierce in the Field Experience. If you're new to the podcast, if you're not new, you've heard about this. You can find the link in the show notes. They are starting. In fact, Field Experience starts today. And so we're super excited about that. You can check those things out in the show notes. But we are, I guess, where do we want to get started here with this? 7 ways. I think number 1, let's just start with number 1 and start talking about them.
Okay. That sounds great.
So we talked through these as it related to our own family and how we are doing as a family and how we have seen ourselves progress over the last number of years. And, like I said, I'm 45, but I mean, I feel healthier than I ever have. I'm, sleeping better. I'm eating healthier.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. But I also feel, but it's not just physical, it's also spiritual and emotional and mental. There's been therapy involved. There's been coaching involved. There's been, spiritual direction involved. There's been a lot of freedom, spiritual healing involved.
Yeah.
And I feel freer than I have ever probably. I feel I don't have the same fear creeping in, things like that. And so, it's not that I'm not struggling at times, but I think there are things that we have done and decisions that we have made. And this is what the field experience is all about. It's about helping other men lead their families and have permission to lead their families the way that they believe God is leading them to guide their families, without it being, because I didn't feel like I had the permission to lead in a different way, but I felt the pressures of society and the quote unquote American dream and the hustle and the bustle, and going, why am I doing this? But I didn't know there was another way. And I think over the last number of years, we have found a new way. We're stepping into a new way of living. And I'm not saying that way of living is what you need to be doing. What I am saying is that you need to find the way of living that God wants you to have that will set your heart free. Because the word says, and I'm going to go right back to the scriptures on this. The Bible says to be a living letter. Paul writes this to the Corinthians. He says, you are a living letter. So we have to understand, basically what he means there is that we carry the presence of God everywhere we go. The connection there in the word, the meaning of the word actually is Ark of the Covenant. Like the Ark of the presence of God went with the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament. Like wherever the Ark of the Covenant went, the presence of God went. Well, now the presence of God goes with us everywhere we go as believers. And so we get to carry. And so I want to make sure that my family isn't looking like the rest of the world. I want to make sure that my family looks very different than the rest of the world, that we are living letters, that we're pointing to Jesus, that we are salt and light in the world. And that trickles all the way down to my children, and that they're a reflection of me. And, my son, my 12-year-old has been saying, Dad, I really want to be working out. I want to get stronger. Well, where do you think that comes from? That doesn't come from just pie in the sky. He's watching his dad work out. He sees his dad being healthy. He sees his dad.
His mom.
And his mom. His mom works out too. But it's like it more is caught than taught. And I think that's the component about this. So number one, the first way to transform the heart of your family in 2025, or at any point, really.
Oh, and hold it. Can I just say to you how we came up with these?
Yeah.
We basically just asked ourselves the question, what has made the biggest difference for us?
Yeah, 100%.
What has transformed our family? What are the key shifts, or if we could make this as practical as possible? Because obviously so much of this could be theoretical, and we could talk about all these concepts. And sometimes we do, and it's important. This is like practical episode. How do we practically transform our family?
And one thing we're not going to do in this episode either is go, hey, go to church more often, pray more often, read your Bible more often. We're not going to do those things, right? Those in many ways are a given. Like we want to walk deep spiritual lives. And if you've listened to the podcast, you understand that's who we are. We're walking with Jesus, or trying to walk with Jesus every step of every day, at every possible moment, to have him at the forefront of our minds in every interaction that we have, every conversation. Well, that only happens through scripture reading and just living this thing out. So I think those are going to go without saying. The first one is decision number 1, by the way, in our book, Famous at Home. So if you don't have a copy of Famous at Home, it'd be a great way to start the year. We'll put that in the show notes today. Number 1 is...
Would you like me to step in? Because I remember.
Hold on. I remember, but I was trying to say it the right way, and then I drew a blank.
I remember.
Number 1 is show up as the best version of yourself. The only thing I can think of is best version of yourself. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Show up as the best.
Be the best version of you.
Show up as the best version of you. So in other words, prioritize you.
And what does that look like? This isn't like go get a massage every week. Although maybe that is for you.
That would be lovely.
But it's like.
We don't do that though.
Our examples are, and by examples, I mean, the thing that made the biggest difference for me personally was cutting out sugar and waking up before the kids. Those were my, not even in that season, still to this day, in this season, as with, we have 12, 10, and 4-year-old. In order to, I homeschool, we work together, we do ministry, business, and try to homestead-ish. And in order to do it, I have to get up before my kids. And I needed to cut out sugar, because sugar became my go-to coping highlight of my day, for those little uppers. And I realized I was going to it and it was causing far more problems than benefit. Like I didn't feel good. I had no energy. I didn't like the way I looked. And that has ripple effects through your marriage, through,
Sure does.
your self-esteem, like all of those things. And so anyway, those were the two for me. And it started with that decision because you cannot, we were talking about this in homeschool today, funny enough, with the kids. You cannot focus on all the things that you want to change at the same time. You will do none of them. And it takes 40 days to create a new habit. And so in order to do it, like it's focusing on what's the one thing. And so I started with waking up before the kids. That's where I started. And then I went after sugar. And it has been a game changer for me. And for Josh.
And I will say this too, pay attention to what you're eating. Like I have noticed this. I was actually thinking about this last night for some reason. I can't remember why, but I go back 2 years ago. I felt better than I ever had because I changed my diet, and I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm not going to get into what I did, but I specifically, sugar is a big thing, a big component of that. But I mean, if you're having mood swings and you're just not feeling 100% yourself, really start prioritizing sleep and eating whole foods. I think that those are the key things. But for me, getting up before the kids is an absolute must. If I'm not up before everybody else in the house, my day, I am a different human being showing up with my children and with my wife. The other part of that, so in that, then I'm doing my quiet time. I'm spending time with Jesus. I'm reading my Bible, but I'm also working out. I have to do a workout. If I'm not working out at least 4 days a week, I am feeling it. And so
Josh is not Josh.
It is not physical. It's not this physical thing. It's also mental and emotional. It's therapy for me.
Oh, 100%.
I've got to release. I got to move my body. I got to work. It's releasing all of the emotion.
And you would say, I mean, probably the very same for me.
100. Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's been, and that's not to, I mean, we're not jumping in that lane. Although that was my background. I was a kinesiology major. So that was my background
and now you do
that was
somatic
my
stuff.
lane. Yeah.
So part of that,
important.
part of that prioritizing you is why we do Tender and Fierce in the Field experience, is because we want to help you prioritize you and come alongside you in doing that. And so that's really, if you want to transform the heart of your family, you got to transform your heart because you dictate the atmosphere of the home. And that's what we're really talking about here, is the atmosphere of the home.
I just want to say this too. I just felt this, a conversation just came back to me as we were talking, someone who was saying like, I know I just don't have anything for me. I do everything with the kids and I just don't have anything for me. And, my husband has his stuff, but there's nothing for me. And I remember being like, this is not the first time I've heard you say this. This is not the 5th time I've heard you say this. This is like probably the 20th time I've heard you say this. And at some point, you have to make the decision for you. I'm not sure what permission you're looking for. Like, you have to prioritize you. You have to do something to change the energy drain on you, especially like with Tender and Fierce. A lot of them are moms, not all. I want to say that too. There's single women, there's married women, no children. There's young women. So, but there are a lot of women who are moms, and the conversation is different when you have little people that will take from you everything they can. And partially that's their role. Our role is to tell them when that's enough. Same with, if you're working, to tell your boss, like, I'm not available after 5 p.m. We have the authority to set boundaries, and we are the only ones who are going to do it. Like, Josh can't set boundaries for me. He can't make sure I'm getting self-care. And we also hear from a lot of spouses where it's like, I just wish my wife, I just wish my husband would do something, like would go out with their friends, would meet a friend for coffee, would go for a walk, go work out, like do things to fill them up, like get a hobby, have fun, go hunting. Like, I wish they would go do that stuff, but no one else can decide that for you but you. And so I just say that to, like, I hope you, as you listen, this isn't trite, like, take care of yourself. Like, actually, that is going to take hard no's to certain things.
Yeah.
And
we've had to say hard no's to certain things
bold
in order
yeses.
to do this. Yeah.
Like, where it's like, I'm worth that. I'm worth signing up for this thing, or I'm worth going to this thing, or I'm worth investing. And this isn't like positive psych crap. This is real value, like you are a daughter and son of God, and you carry such worth and value, and you are the only one that God has entrusted that life with.
And that is your soul that you're
Yeah.
caring for. So you have to prioritize
Yeah.
your soul. And that's what I think about, which leads us to number 2. Because what we're doing is we're focusing on the atmosphere of your home, paying attention, which is
Well, that's what we realized
decision
as we
2
talked
in the
about
book
them all.
Famous
Yeah.
at Home. Is what we coach families into. But number 2 then is focusing on your family schedule.
Yep.
What in your family schedule needs to get cut out
Yep.
in order to shift the atmosphere of your home. So
Hard
the
dose.
atmosphere of your home is already dictated by how we're showing up.
Mhm.
But then number 2 is, where are we looking? And one way you can do this is you can put every activity that you have on a sticky note, lay it all in the middle of the table to start the year and go, okay, what is life giving? What is not life giving? You could do red light, green light, and yellow light it. Red light is a hard no. Green light is yes. And yellow light is kind of, well, let's talk about this. But I'll give you an even more practical example. Before the holidays, before Christmas, we had family coming in town. We had just a bunch of friends and people in our community we hadn't seen in a while and really wanted to get together with. And so we packed the schedule a couple weeks before Christy's family was ready to come into town. And all of a sudden we started looking at the calendar and started looking at everything and going, now, wait a minute. What about the soul of our own family?
Yeah.
And we had to do an about face in that season and go, you know what? We're not going to add anything else to our schedule. Let's prioritize our family. Let's prioritize what we have to do with the 5 of us. And we'll push everything else to the new year.
And not even what we have to do. It was like,
what we want to do, what we
what
get
do
to
we
do.
want to do?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, we realized we were in great intentions, wanting, everyone wants to be together and connect. And so we were planning like this dinner with this couple, and we're doing, and this family over, and doing this and going to this thing with these people. And it was because we could put it in the schedule. And then we realized we were running, like, I was feeling anxious, and I don't typically struggle with, I would say, like, I feel pressured, but this felt like anxiety, like a true anxiety. And gosh,
it was, I remember the day that happened when we decided to make some of those changes. I was reading out of a devotional. It's a woman's devotional, but I was reading the women's devotional because it's a dear friend of ours, Courtney Smallbone. You can get the devotional.
Oh my gosh, it made me cry.
We'll put it in the show notes. Technicolor woman. I am a Technicolor man. Okay?
That's right, babe.
But I was reading it.
That you're reading it.
And the day was on presents. And she put this proverb in there of these people trying to push to carry goods. And they pushed them. They did double the amount. They were hiking, and they did double the amount in day 2. But in day 3, they didn't go anywhere. And the people that were trying to get them to move the goods or said, hey, why are you not going anywhere? And they said, we need a day off because we pushed so hard yesterday. We now need to wait for our souls to catch up with us. And I was like, I felt that. I legit felt that in that season. And that's what this episode is about. You want to transform the heart of your family. Your soul has to catch up to the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that's going to happen is for you to dictate it, because no one else is in charge of your schedule other than you. And so for us, we made some decisions to do the things that brought us life as a family, to make sure that we experienced the awe of Christmas and that we weren't just saying yes to things. And they were good things.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you can say yes to good things and still just keep going from thing to thing to thing, and lose your soul in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So pay attention. What needs to go? What needs, for example, we have our kids in some activities, jiu-jitsu being one of them. And, I'm constantly evaluating where they at. Do they like it? Do they not like it? Are we gaining anything out of it? And I mean, it has been an absolute gift for our 2 oldest kids. And, it's a community. It's teaching them a lot of discipline, and they love it. And so that's one thing where they're finding an outlet that you go, don't know that this is a chopping block thing because it's just bringing too much life to our kids. And so pay attention to the things that you go, and this is why I'm saying, like, not all sports are bad, but some sports are bad.
Mm-hmm.
So some activities are not healthy for your family. And so only you can know that in praying through that. So focus on your schedule.
You know what you also said though the other day that I thought was so profound is you said
Tell me, enlighten me.
You said it so casually. He goes, "Oh, it's just too much of a good thing." And I was like, "Yeah, it's been too much of a good thing. Even if they're good things, it's too much, and that actually makes them bad things. Like meaning the value or the benefit is lost because it's too much."
Well, it's like our kids, spending time with our kids. We homeschool.
Yes.
We're with our kids a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that can be too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to separate.
We evaluate that, like, and are even in a season evaluating that right now, where it's like there becomes, that can't be the be all end all either, because that sucks. It actually sucks everyone dry, where we need this balance in life, this rhythm of like coming and going and in and out and with and alone. And so again, all to that to say, just to pay attention to like even the good things, like, is it too much of a good thing? Is it benefiting and blessing, or is it causing?
And it leads to number 3.
Pressure.
And again, some of these are in our book on Famous at Home. We'll put that in show notes. But the number 3 is your weekly rhythms.
Yeah.
Paying attention to your weekly rhythms. So now that you've looked at your family schedule and you're kind of like, what do we cut? What do we not cut? What do your weekly rhythms look like?
Or what do you want your weekly rhythm to look like? I think that's where we started, where we didn't even have a weekly rhythm. Every weekend
we had a little bit more of a blank slate because we homeschool. But if you don't, and your kids go to public school and you're going to a job that you're not working out of your home on, you're going to have there's a part of your weekly rhythm that's already set for you. And so it's taking the rest of that and it's figuring that out. We have a little bit more of a blank slate, which I feel like makes it a little bit more difficult in some respects.
Which is, again, it can become too much of a good thing when you have total freedom, and also then random, like our schedule is very...
Because we often try to get to a sense of, how do I get free from 9 to 4, or
Right.
how do you get free from this certain time so that we can work?
Or weekends where
paying
Josh is
attention to that.
traveling a ton, speaking, and like we just have a very different life schedule, and so that was hard and so rewarding to actually create a family rhythm,
Right.
which we then defend and protect as much as we can. Obviously life happens, but where we have, and we've talked about this on so many podcasts, so I don't even need to, like, we have Shabbat on Friday night. We have a Sabbath
start with
on Saturday.
Sabbath, if you're looking to start anywhere, start with one day a week that your entire family rests.
Yeah.
And defend that rhythm to the core, where it's just like, this is what we are doing. One day a week is purely rest. And we start with this, Christy said, Friday night Shabbat dinner, and we rest on Saturday.
Yeah. And I think also to just add into that conversation, if you start with rest on one day, where are also the margins of rest within the other days? Because you are not a workhorse. And so what we would tend to do, because I think we're fairly high capacity people, is we would pack our days. Like, yeah, we rested Saturday, but that was the only day. And the other days are like from wake to night, like it's thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And that's what was driving us into chaos, because we didn't have margin between, like, we'd podcast and we're right back into like homeschooling or taking, this, and we're on phone calls and we're doing meetings, and we have so many people in and out of our house. And it's just like, we planned no margin. Like, we all need time to go sit outside and stare at a tree for like 10 minutes, like to just reset, to walk, to just go for like 5-10 minute walk in between things. We allowed
ground
for
yourself.
None of that.
Yeah. Grounding is incredibly important.
Like, make a cup of tea or something where it just is a
Get out
reset.
and soak in some morning sun.
Yeah. But between all of the things, and to create these little pockets or margins of rest within the week. So that would be number 3. I think is evaluating the schedule.
Yeah, evaluate the schedule. Find rhythms that work for you. So, one of the things that we do is we do Tender and Fierce and the Field Experience on Wednesday nights. And the reason, and I've run into already to a situation where it's like, well, my wife and I can't do it together because, we have kids. And I'm like, well, we did it that way so that we're not working every night of the week or 2 or 3 nights out of the week.
Right.
We want to be present with our kids and live our message. So we chose Wednesday nights to do these things. And then we have someone watch the kids. And so it gives us the opportunity to have one night a week that it's kind of the tip of the bell curve, if you will. It's like, it's the tough day where it's like everyone's working late. This is kind of what we're doing. But then we're coming down off of that Thursday into Friday into Shabbat and Saturday and rest. And so those rhythms also, we've talked about this before. I talk about this when I speak, is, in Genesis chapter 1, every single day, at the end of every day, God rested. Mm-hmm. And he created the daily rhythm. It started with evening. Hebrew calendar starts in evening and ends, ends in the afternoon. So it starts in the evening. And so there was evening and then morning, day one, evening, then morning. Go read that in Genesis. It's because we were designed to live from rest, not fighting for it. And so you start with the most incredible meal of the day. You start with sleep. And then with everything else that you have left, what's God doing with that? What are you doing with what God has given you? And then God, at the end of every day, looked back and said, this was good. Well, this was good. Everything he created was good. And I think in our culture, we get so caught up in saying, you know what, I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough of this. What would it look like to sit at dinner every night and look back on the day and go, that was good. That was good. And so that's what Christy talked about, is you got to find those life-giving things. So that leads us.
Number 4.
I
know it. Give your kids responsibility. This one I think has been, now we have, a couple older, one younger.
Now this is what's fascinating. Yeah, go ahead.
But I think this has been the same for all of them, is that has changed the tone of our home from one of consumption to one of, really productivity, of creativity, of investment, of like, I can contribute to the world. And that gives you self-worth and value. We see that our 4-year-old, if we don't give him jobs, we have behavior issues. If we give him jobs, little things, big, like sometimes we're getting into some bigger things where he is so proud, and all of it, like, you have children, you watch the pride on their face, and it's like, oh, it's amazing. And yet I think we sometimes feel this tension of, maybe they've got a lot going with school, and it's like, I don't want to put more on them. Is that too much? And I think to just, like, humans were made to work. Even before the fall, we were actually built to work. God put that in us. And so if that is how we are designed, it's in our DNA, we thrive off of work, and we do really well with it. And we struggle when again, with balance, obviously we are commanded to rest. And so it's within balance. But when we work, we get to work. And we've done that too with animals. That's been part of the reason we've gotten animals, was seeing how good it was for the kids to get beyond themselves. Like, it's cold out right now where we live, and they have to go out and tend to those animals regardless. And they have to go out early in the morning because water feeders are frozen and the animals will die. And so it's actually like, sorry, like, they don't get to eat breakfast yet because they got to go take care of the animals. So to put yourself last for probably the first time in their little lives, when they're used to, mom and dad caring for them and what's for breakfast or what's for lunch and what are we doing today? It's like they have taken on the real, I think, view of life, where there are others to care for, and I'm the one who gets to do it. And that responsibility has been beautiful.
Yeah. And it's, you just said it, it's entering real life.
Yeah.
It's getting our kids to enter real life, to experience responsibility and move away from entitlement.
So good.
Because that's the problem that we have in our culture today, is false victimhood and entitlement.
Yeah.
And kids are just caught up in it. And I think screen time's a big factor of that. But when kids don't have responsibility, they're bored, and it leads to behavior issues, as Christy said. And so give kids responsibility. Again, we've done that through homesteading or trying to homestead, I should say, and fumbling our way through that. But the fascinating part about that is I've done very little. I do a lot of setup. So I set up fences. I build bases of chicken coops. I, do a lot of fencing and things like that. And I do set up. But then once it's set up, I pretty much am hands off, and I'll help here and there with heavy bags of lifting a feed or things like that. but the kids are running with it and they are confident. They can talk about these things. They do projects on them before they even get them. And I just think it's really important for us to think about how can we help our kids to become more resourceful, because resourcefulness leads to confidence.
You know what? What you just said there, I do want to just add that. So again, we homeschool. Whether or not you do, I don't think that matters. What we did, it was because our kids would ask for, certain things. They would ask for chickens. They asked for ducks. They've asked for goats. They asked for dogs. They have, all horses, all the things. Whatever that is for your kids. If it's an Xbox, if it's a whatever they're asking for, we make them do a research project and write out. So they have to research it and then answer. I just ask like a whole bunch of questions that I want them to cover, because I want to know, what does it have to eat? How do we take care of it? What's the best kind to get? How much is it? Where would you find it? What do we need? What medical issues come with that? Or, all the things. And that's their responsibility. And so they will do all the research and they will write it out in this little report. And I help them edit it. And we help them, like, obviously with all of that. But it has created so much investment in how much work it is, what it costs to do it. And really it's the beginnings of responsibility, where they're recognizing how significant a decision this is when they ask mom and dad for stuff. Maybe that's even like, I want to play baseball this year. Okay, how much does it cost? How many times a week do you play? How much travel is it? How much was that going to cost in gas for us to, drive you? Like, how much time is that going to take? And putting some of that responsibility on them has been part of that. And that's been a beautiful, again, shift away from entitlement and into like, they take ownership over it. And that's been beautiful.
And our 10-year-old daughter also started a gumball machine business this past year. And so even helping her figure out how much is the gumball machine going to cost. I'm not buying it for you. Like, you got to realize there's investment in this before you start getting your return. So, what is a P&I, what is your profit or P&L statements? What are your profit and loss? And really helping her set up a spreadsheet and see exactly what it entails to buy product for it and how much, she's going to get a return on that. And, these are just life lessons that we need to understand in order to help our kids feel confident heading out into the world. And so this is, I think these are the things, giving our kids responsibilities and just finding what that is for you and your family.
And because when we're talking about the environment of like, how are we changing the heart of our family? We cannot carry all of this. Like, if my children, again, they're not infants anymore. Obviously, that's our role when they're infants, toddlers, preschool. There is a lot of responsibility on us. But the job is to work ourselves out of a job. The job is to grow adults that are fully functioning and then also contribute to the family. And I think so often our culture it's been this helicopter parenting, infantilizing them, where they're like, we're acting like they're cutting up their food and, we're taking on way too much. And I think that's why, what was it? The first last year, 2024, when the Surgeon General came out with
August, mental health and well-being of parents. It was 33% of parents had in the last month made a statement, had reported to being overly stressed.
Yeah.
So he put an advisory out on the mental health and well-being of parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, is it's like, it's also busy schedules and individualizing everybody. Right. So everybody is so individualized in their own activity, but we're overly doting. And then we're taking on the responsibility of all the travel sports and all the other things and whatever that. And again, not all of that is bad. It's just, how well is it serving your family? And is it uniting your family or disintegrating your family? Right. Because it's like you said, we're not all, this isn't just you and I's responsibility. We're not just doing this. There's no way we could do all of it.
No.
And it's fascinating as you're talking about it, because I think what it's doing is it unites our family
totally
in common purpose, in common goal.
Yeah.
Whereas if only jiu-jitsu is Landon's thing. Jiu-jitsu is Kennedy's thing. They have that together. You and I don't have that.
Yeah.
Right. And so what ends up happening is when everybody has their own individual thing, what does the family have?
Right.
What is bringing your family together and unifying your family unit? And we got to find those things. And a lot of times giving your kids responsibilities helps unite the family because let's be honest, there's a degree to which you are responsible for the things that you're giving them responsibility for anyway. So you're all, whether directly or indirectly, you're united around a common goal.
And I think you're watching the full person of your kids come out. That's what it is. Because otherwise, like they're going off into their individual things and maybe their baseball coach is seeing the best of your child, right? Because he sees him or her like going after and growing. But at home, they revert back to just like, Mom, I need a snack. Did you pack is your bag packed for practice? Oh, I don't like where is the responsibility? Like, let's watch our children grow into the most mature, wholehearted beings within the family, like that we get to experience one another at our best, not our worst. And I think that's what happens is when we get individualized and they're all out doing their things. Sure, we might be shining out on our stages out there, and yet at home, it's this crumbling family unit. And responsibility has been another one.
So I'm going to go to the next one because I think it ties right in, and that's limit screen time. I mean, it goes without saying. I feel like we talk about this so much, and you probably are all like, oh yeah, we got to figure this out. Listen, we're talking about a whole bunch of different ways that can transform your family. You got to find the one that works most for you. So at the end of the conversation today, I'll go, what was most useful for you? And I want you to think through that. I should have said that in the beginning. What's most useful for you?
Right now.
Right now.
Like first,
and most often what ends up happening is we say, oh yeah, I got to limit my screens. But then we never do it. And you got to identify, what is that for you? What does that look like for your family? I can tell you, I know when our kids have watched too much television or have watched
over the holidays, travel, we were flying and driving and like, I mean, we all realize it, but it becomes this like slippery slope down where and then it becomes normal. Like it's the normative thing.
And so we've had to really put a kibosh. And so, our kids, they like to play Nintendo Switch. They do it on Saturday and Sunday only, right? So it's like they can have, 45 minutes of time to do it in these specific windows. And you can tell behavior-wise whether screen time is influencing your home and how it's influencing the environment of your home. And so we're just really, and a lot of it's very hard because it's easier to start strict and then get more lenient over time. It's very difficult to start lenient and then get strict. And so many of us, you might be in a boat where it's like you started lenient and now you're trying to get strict. And that is a difficult way to pull back. Mm-hmm. But in some respects, if you own the device and it's under your roof, you have 100% responsibility to go, you know what? We're cutting screen time, but you have to lead the way. And I think that's the key, for us is going, how are we influencing? Because listen, the research is ridiculous on this. Like there's actually a thing, I call it secondhand screen time, but it's where we end up paying continuous partial attention to our kids. Continuous partial attention. And so what happens is it actually inhibits the pleasure center of our child's brain when they're going, Mommy, Daddy, watch this, watch this, watch this. And we are on our phones and they're not getting our full 100% attention. They're getting continuous partial attention over time. It inhibits the pleasure center of their brain and actually influences the attachment system. And so for us to pay attention to how we're using our screens, especially in front of our kids, is really, really important. So it might be that you decide this year to take off some certain apps off of your phone. It might be that you set timers on how often you're on certain apps on your phone. We have to pay attention to this. The other component of this, there's incredible research out there.
Can I just say for a second, how convicted I feel with you. It's not that I don't know those things. That is so hard. Mm-hmm. And I felt that like over holiday season where you're on your phone, how many of us relate and you're buying stuff, you're like grocery lists.
Especially for you as a woman.
Online. Yeah. Online
I say as a woman, like you handle a lot of our online buying purchases, things like that. I mean, I help you a lot, but like,
oh my gosh,
you're on it more because you handle a lot more of that.
And Micah, our little guy, is like, Mom, hey, Mom. And I'm like, buddy, I'm right here. But like, I know what he means. It's because I'm on my, I guess I'm right there.
I get it because I do it to you. Yeah. I'm like, hey, honey, are you going to listen to me?
I know. And I'm like buying groceries and I'm buying, handling all the gift buying and all, like just all the things and the scheduling things and the texting things. And oh my gosh, texting, that's like a whole other second job, and it feels to just like, I just want to say that, like, I feel the conviction on that. I know like what a wrestle this is. And I really think like we're the first generation of parents that are raising young children with this level of like in our pocket access, that like our moms were on those phones with the like, twisty cords, plugged in, talking to their friends in the kitchen.
Right,
That was
right,
different,
right.
than this constant
Right. Yeah.
phone. Like I have it with me. I'm walking through the house with it. So how do we do that? And I'm not saying I have the solution, because clearly it is an issue, and it's an issue for our whole generation. Like this is the norm. If you're not accessible via text or quickly like on social media or whatever, it's like, did you see, well, you didn't see my message? It's like,
Yeah. Always available. But you
I
can
got
change that by not being available and making it so that people are like, hey, I didn't see it. You know why? Because I don't check those things. And that, I mean, a lot of times if I get a DM on Facebook, I might notice it 6 months later. Like I just don't.
That's real. Yeah,
I don't even look at my DMs very much. Like I don't care about that, because if someone needs to get a hold of me, they'll get a hold of me. They'll figure it out, right? Like I don't need to be. Email and text messages are enough for me. That if you can't figure out how to get in touch with me that way, then you don't need to get in touch with me that badly. And so, again, people might kick back on that. That's just my personal conviction.
You've had to put a boundary up there. Like
100%.
you can't be like, you're on email all the time. I'm probably on text and even in social media. Cause I people message me all the time on there, and it's becomes another thing to maintain. And then you have these little people in your face that you want to be in relationship with. And I just want to say, like, I know it genuinely is a really big struggle. And yet that's why I went off social media for 2 years. Like I completely took them all off I was actually almost 3. It was almost 3 years. And I just like, that is a wrestle. And it is I really feel like for all of us, it is a coming to like, Holy Spirit, I need you to be my counselor and my guide on this one.
And
because I left to our own devices, we'll just stay in the hamster wheel.
You have to be walking with the Lord on that, because, I think there's seasons where, like for me, if I'm on Instagram or whatever, I'm posting and then jumping off. Like I'm not going to try to scroll and set timer on how much you're gonna do.
Your discipline is admirable,
right?
Levy.
But then again, I can look up ESPN, right? And I can look up sports news, right? But the other thing I don't do is I don't do push notifications on my phone, and I don't do any news. If it's newsworthy, it will come to me via my friends. I kind of let my friends curate my news for me. It's like those are ways that you can begin to think about what does it look like to limit the amount of screen time that you are on, so that you can be more in real life. And I was going to give this last thing too. I've studied this for so many years and just have seen this all coming out. I knew it was coming to a head. You could just see it. I mean, it was just like a tidal wave. But there was another research study done. This was a number of years back that showed that boredom. I mean, you think about this. Steve Jobs didn't allow his kids to have an iPad. Bill Gates wouldn't allow his daughters to have an iPhone or have any cell phone until they were 13. And then when they did, they were only allowed to, there was no data allowed on it. They were only allowed to use it as a phone. And, all these tech company executives were protecting their kids from it. And you're going, what do they know about it that we don't? And I think a lot of it had to do with the inhibition of what it does is it inhibits the ability to be creative. Mm-hmm. And so research shows that it takes at least 15 to 20 minutes of boredom for creativity to kick in. Well, what do we do when we pick up our phone? When we pick up a screen, we're numbing out. And so the word muse means to think deeply. When you put an A in front of the word, it negates its very definition. So what do we do when we amuse? We don't think deeply. Mm-hmm. And so what we're doing is we're raising an entire generation of kids into creative impotence because they can't be bored. They don't know how to be bored. And so I just really want to encourage you, let your kids be bored and get them outside. Let them find creative ways to be creative, mm-hmm. and give them the tools necessary to do that.
So good.
Because otherwise I want my children to lead in the future. I don't want them to be a follower. Yeah. And the way they're going to lead is by being creative. Yeah. So,
okay, number 6.
So I think it's hospitality.
Or life-giving friends. We kind of combined them. I think it has really been impactful for us, the people we surround ourselves with. Being isolated, and we've had seasons of that. when we moved back to Pennsylvania, like I called it my cave season. We had family there, but we didn't have community like friendships that were in similar seasons of life or even really living, similarly. And coming back, both before I think we left and when we came back, we moved back to Tennessee. It has become our lifeline in a lot of ways is the community that we have and life-giving friends. And I don't mean community. I think people toss that word around a lot. I think the community are the people you do life alongside. That could look like your kids, ball families, like the families or church, or, for us, it's been like a really, I think almost like hand-selected group of friends that they don't even all know each other necessarily, but they're all life-giving friendships for us. Like we come alive. It's iron sharpening iron. They make us better. We challenge each other and we really do try to be in each other's lives. Like I'm going to right over as soon as we're done this to a friend to just sit and have coffee. Like I didn't do that stuff before because I didn't prioritize it, quite honestly.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
and I think for you, like life-giving friends is, by the way, I'm going to correct you on something. I apologize for doing that. We didn't combine these two. This is number 6.
but we
But
didn't,
it is separate.
we didn't do hospitality before.
No, that's going to be number 7.
Oh,
Right. So number 6 was life-giving friends. Number 7 will be hospitality.
that's not on the sheet down
I didn't
there.
write it that way.
Oh.
Yeah. But we did separate them.
But we did talk about that.
Because
kind of
the reality
same,
is this,
though.
because they aren't. Because you're going to be hospitable to life-giving friends, but the word says, right? If you love your friends,
I
right?
see.
Like you love your brother and sister, like hospitality is about reaching out beyond just your friends.
Do you feel like, oh yeah.
Right? Like
okay.
caring
yeah,
for the
yeah,
orphan,
yeah. We
the
were talking
widow,
about that.
right? Like
Yeah.
you've got to be able to, and so you've part of stepping out with giving your kids responsibility is caring for others. Like hospitality is caring for others outside yourself, right? So life-giving friends is what gives you the ability, I think, to be able to go do hospitality well.
So is life-giving friends 6 in our
Well, that's what
in
we're
our
going to say.
faux list
In
here?
our list. That's right.
Okay. And 7 is
But
hospitality.
the reality though, and let's get back to number 6 then on this, is there's so many people who kick back in our season of life who go, we don't have that many friends. We don't have any friends. I don't know. Like we don't have anybody we can talk to. We don't have anybody we can trust. We don't have anybody we can. And I think there's a degree to which I understand that we were in that season.
Yeah.
Yet there's also a degree to which that was our fault. Because
Totally.
we weren't putting ourselves out there to find those friends. And in some respects, you got to date friends, right? It's like,
or even follow up with the ones from previous seasons
That's
that
right.
were in your life, but like you may not even live nearby. You can still be highly invested in each other's lives. That's where I dropped the ball. It's like we've moved so many times, and I'm like, you can only carry so many relationships from one season into another, and yet when I go, you get in a quiet, lonely season, I know they're still there for me, and I'm for them, and it's like, you're not alone, and it does require effort. And I will say this also, it may not be in your local community right now. You may be in a quiet season in your local community, but I promise they're out there, and to encourage you to reach out. Like what comes to me, we just had a call 2 nights ago with the Tender and Fierce alumni. So the women that attended the first retreat. And so now we have our like Tender and Fierce 2.0, which is sort of like our discipleship program. And those women were together. It was over the course of 3 days, but it really was only 2 full days of time. They are more connected than most. Like they will tell you, they rely on one another. They are constantly in communication. They are each other's go-to. Oh, I feel that for prayer. Like even beyond the friends in their real lives, they go to one another because what God did there was so significant, and it was deep, and it was real. And I just encourage you, find something like, I'm not saying it has to be Tender and Fierce or the Field Experience, though that is why we created them, so that it is in community. So you do have, like, we grow and we heal in relationship. We're also wounded in relationship. And so we have to have disconfirming experiences in order to heal relationship wounds. So when we've been wounded in a relationship and you're like, I don't, there's no good people out there. They've hurt me. Like, I know, same. Yes, I know. And yet, the only way that I heal is by having a disconfirming experience where that friend did stay, where that friend didn't betray, where that friend spoke life, where that friend came in when others left. That's how we heal. And we have to have the courage to keep stepping into that. And yet it's so real. Those times where it's like we're gun shy. It's like I'm scared to try again. And I just want to encourage you. It is the lie of the enemy to believe that there are not friends that are actually made for you. Like God created us to be in community. So I believe he literally knit together humans specifically packaged together that would be a perfect fit to be your friend. And so I even just pray we like call them out of the woodwork, that they would come and that you would have the boldness to step into relationship with them because they're out there.
And as a man, like I'm telling you, like we would not be living the life that we live. We wouldn't be making the decisions that we do without the other men in my life that I can call on, that I can live around, who raised me up to a higher level. And that's what I'm saying in terms of finding living letters. We've talked about this many, many times. I try to find the men who have gone before me, who have raised their kids really, really well. And you look at their kids and you go, man, whatever you did, I want to do that. Invite them to lunch, invite them to dinner, try to find an opportunity to get into their life, buy their meal and learn from them. Ask them tons of questions. Don't ask, hey, will you mentor me? Nobody's got time to be mentoring. Everyone's going to be like, no, I don't have time to do that. But they can start mentoring you. And just by you taking them to dinner, by you taking them to, like, it doesn't have to be anything formal. Just start getting into each other's lives. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is start finding those relationships that you can really start to surround yourself with, which leads, I believe, to what we are called to do as Christians, which is putting ourselves into biblical hospitality. Now, I talked about this in a previous episode last year. It was early last year, and I can link it in the show notes. But I talked about a spiritual development of a mother and father. Mm-hmm. And basically, the progression is becoming, starts with us becoming and prioritizing who we're becoming, healing our own wounds and pain and past hurts, and really focusing on that. And then number 2, becoming present so that we can be present with our loved ones, with my wife, with my kids, and in community, becoming present in community. The third stage of that is in community, where we are now, there was a season where we were in survival mode with our first 2 kids. There's an age gap, 12, 10, and 4 for a reason. But we were in survival mode. Now we are in thriving mode. Like we have gotten to a season where, we weren't in community. We were trying to fix ourselves. We were trying to, in that becoming, we were trying to find our way. But to be quite honest, we weren't there. And you might be in that season, and that's quite okay. I think there's a progression. I think there are seasons. There's a season for every time and purpose under heaven, is what Ecclesiastes says. And so pay attention to the season that you're in, but I think that we're always to be moving towards blessing other people. Mm-hmm. We're always, even in I think it's 1 Corinthians 3, it says, the God of all compassion, who had compassion on us so that we can have compassion on other people. Like the whole point is not for you to stay stuck in your pain. The whole point is for us to go serve and love and help heal other people and set other people free. And that's what biblical hospitality is all about. It's what opening your home up is all about. And to love the orphan, to love the widow, to love those in need, and to serve those in need. And when you bring your family around that purpose and around that, it's your life-giving friendships that lead your ability to be able to step out in and be hospitable, because now you have an overflow to give out of. And sometimes here's the other component of that. You might not have an overflow to give out of. You might be giving out of complete 100% depletion. But yet it is in your weakness that he is made strong. That because in our weakness is how he is made strong. And so there are times, so don't hear me say like, oh, you shouldn't say yes when you are weak. This is why walking with Holy Spirit is so incredibly important, because there are times you're going to be weak that you've got to say yes and you've got to serve, because someone is genuinely in need and you got to pour out. Yeah. But you can't pour out of your tank. You got to pour out of his tank and what he's filling you up in.
Ooh. And I think there is such a beautiful, like you said, it's walking with the Holy Spirit to determine when that is a yes and when that is a no, because there's no cut and dry answer. Because I think motherhood is a continual pouring out. And then yet I have a friend who uses the term spiritual bulimia. We also then get this idea that like we just have to be poured into just enough to like puke it back up for someone else. Like that is a sickness. That's not how God created us to live. He created us to be filled, to be nurtured by his love, not just keep regurgitating out the little morsels that we get. And so that is a beautiful, I think, back to this word of balance of like listening to the Lord to know when it is time to have an infilling and a refilling. And when it is time, like I have nothing left, Lord, and yet I will say yes. Because that's like fasting, right? Where it is like he is pushing you to the end of yourself to break something. Like when we do our in-person retreats and when I do, like, those are intense seasons of there's so much pouring out. And, you can get to the end and you're like, I literally have nothing left right now. And then there's more. And then he walks you through and there is, you really feel his strength. And that's beautiful. But it's knowing his voice to know when is yes and when is no.
And speaking of his voice, I'd invite you to just seek him right now in this moment and just ask him to go, Holy Spirit, what is it that I listened to in this episode that you want me to focus on? What is the one strategy we need to implement? What is the one practical way that we can transform the heart of our family? And seek him right now in that. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? What's the thing that popped out at you this entire episode? What is that? And then I'd love for you to write it down and find, and you may even ask yourself this question: what was the most useful takeaway for me? What was the most useful thing? What am I going to walk away from this episode doing and implementing in my home? We talked about prioritizing the best version of you, showing up as the best version of you. We talked about your family schedule and eliminating what needs to be eliminated. We talked about setting weekly rhythms so that you're living rhythmically and not knowing what's going to come day to day, starting with Sabbath. We also talked about giving kids responsibility so that your kids grow up being resourceful and not entitled. The next one was limiting screen time and paying attention to, that's just explanatory. Like, the screen time issue for you and your children.
It's not just children's screen time.
Finding life-giving friends and investing in life-giving friends and being a life-giving friend. And then also the last one is stepping out into community, being community, where your home, as my friend Jeremy Pryor says, is your home is not a retreat center, it's an outpost. So how are you inviting others in? How are you living out hospitality in your local community and to those around you? I'm telling you, these things in our lives have brought us life. They have transformed the heart of our family. They are transforming the heart of our family. These are the things that make us tick. These are the things that we're continuing to live out. And so we want to invite you to join us in transforming the heart of our families, because this year in 2025, our heart is to see family revival in your family and in thousands of families across the world. And so we're going to even have a button on our website for you to be able to click where you can tell us your story of family revival, whether it was your marriage, whether it was with your children, whatever that looked like. We would love to hear your story, your testimony of family revival. And our goal is to get 10,000 family revival stories this year. And so we'll have that there on the website that you can click on and tell your story of family revival to us. And we do that by being living letters to the world and being living letters to others around us. And so if this episode blessed you, we encourage you to share it with another family. And we encourage you to go out and be a living letter to those around you so that others start asking, what makes your family so different?
Until next week, we pray your heart is awakened and your family sees revival.
May you find your way home.